Hey guys, welcome back to another games I recently bought video. Now let's start off this video with, Odin Sphere for the PS2. Now I was at my local mall with my best friend, and he decided to go into a GameStop because I don't really go into GameStop anymore. I don't really buy much games anymore for like the new generation of games, like for the PS3 and 360 or the Wii. I haven't been buying those kind of games for a really long time because I've been buying retro games. So I was like, okay, what the hell? I go in and then I found Odin Sphere. I've been looking for Odin Sphere for a really long time, and I really wanted to get it. But the problem I had at the time was I didn't have enough money. And my best friend was really nice, and he said, I'll pick it up for you. It's only what, $8.99, because he had a power-up rewards card, so it was $8.99, and he helped me get it. And that's what we best friends do. We buy each other things, or if we are in a bit of a money pinch or whatnot, we help each other out. We loan each other money. I do the same thing with him too, and that's what best friends do, because we're that close. We're like that. He'll help me buy it, and that's really nice of him to do that for me. So yeah, I first saw Odin Sphere after I saw Muramasa the Demon Blade for the Wii, and I've been looking for Odin Sphere for a really long time, and I finally found it at GameStop, and I was really happy to pick it up. Now, Odin Sphere is actually basically a RPG hack and slash, and you get to play the game through 5 multiple characters, and generally there's only just one main storyline, but then you get to see the main story through 5 different characters' perspectives. So that's the good part of this game. And though it is a hack and slash game, which is a side-scrolling hack and slash game, a 2D side-scrolling hack and slash, it's not very repetitive, and it's very fun actually, because one thing is you don't just constantly press one button and just beat all the enemies that are in your way. You actually really have to think about how you're going to attack your enemies or how you're going to approach them, which is a really great way to do this, because how the problem with hack and slash games, it kind of gets a bit repetitive after a while. Not saying it's a bad thing, but this game actually makes it more interesting. You don't just constantly press just one button. You really have to think about what you're going to do next, and you can actually use different items like this nitro bomb, and you can use this alchemy system where you can create like potions and other items, which is really cool, so you can mess around with that. And yeah, it's a really great game. The art is really fantastic. I really love the art in this game. If you've ever seen Muramasa the Demon Blade, the art style in that game, it's the exact same as Odin Sphere. It's really wonderful, really colorful. All the character designs are really amazing. Highly recommend you guys checking out Odin Sphere if you ever get the chance to. Really should check this out. This is a really great game. It has to do with Norse mythology. So really, I really like mythology. I really like Greek mythology. Any type of mythology I really like, because I really like all these different weird creatures and stuff like that. Next up, I have some PSP games. You've probably seen this already in my unboxing videos. So I'm just going to show you guys again. I picked up Crisis Core for the not Crisis Core for the Final Fantasy, but Crisis Core for the PSP. This is the prequel to the Final Fantasy VII game. This introduced us to Zack Fair, and how, he was a mentor to Cloud Strife, and how Cloud, as a soldier, you actually see him as a soldier, and how he became, who he is to this day. Yeah, you actually get to see that. So this is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and it's a really fun, fantastic game. Basically, it's not like, turn-based and whatnot. You do hack and slash, but it's really fun. I really like this game. It's really awesome. The story's interesting, and you really fall in love with Zack himself, because you don't really know much about Zack Fair. You actually see him in one of the, OVA movies for Final Fantasy VII. I think it's called Final Fantasy VII The Last Package, or something like that, and it was just basically Final Fantasy Crisis Core almost. And we don't really know much about Zack Fair, but this game really brings his character to life and makes you really feel bad for Zack, before the end. And I don't really want to spoil the end, but if you did play Final Fantasy VII, you already know what happened to Zack. Or if you ever watched Advent Children, you would know what happened to Zack already. But I really like this game. Great introduction to Sephiroth, Zack, Angio, Genesis, Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, and all these other Final Fantasy VII characters. Even, I think, the Shinra soldiers too, and forgot what they were called. But yeah, really awesome, introduction to Final Fantasy VII, or prequel to Final Fantasy VII. So next up is one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and if you guys didn't know what my favorite Final Fantasy game is, it's actually Final Fantasy IV, and this is Final Fantasy IV, the complete collection for the PSP. This game is actually 3 games in one. You have Final Fantasy IV, which is the main Final Fantasy IV game, and you have Final Fantasy IV Interlude, which is between Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. So yeah, you get 3 games in one. Final Fantasy Interludes what's going to happen between, you know, the events that happened between Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. Now, the After Years, you know, is basically a couple years after Final Fantasy IV's ending. And yeah, speaking of Final Fantasy IV, the ending, I have never beat Final Fantasy IV in my whole entire life. And I know that's sad. And how can Final Fantasy IV be my favorite game if I never beat it? Well, I actually played Final Fantasy IV on the DS before I played, you know, the PSP version. When I played Final Fantasy IV on the DS, I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with actually the cutscenes. They were really great in the DS version. Cecil was an amazing character. His love interest, Rose, one of his close friends, totally forgetting his name at this moment. Kane, yeah, Kane. And, you know, you have a ninja character named Edge. You have a summoner named... Oh, God, now her name's going to be... Whoa, okay, I totally forgot her name. But yeah, you have a really a lot of amazing characters in this game. It's really fun. The story is really great. I really like this game. Really need to beat the game, though. That's one thing I really need to do. But I really highly recommend you picking up Final Fantasy IV. If you ever want to play a Final Fantasy game, you have to play Final Fantasy IV. Now we're going to get into the retro games right here. So before I start that, I actually made a video of, you know, unboxing this console, but the console I got to play my retro games was actually the Retro Duo made by Retrobit. Now this game actually plays NES games and SNES games. Now when I got this, the reason I actually got this was because, well, you know, at the time, you know, I was looking through ThinkGeek's website and I actually saw this. And I was like, this is pretty cool, because at the time my friend was actually getting to, you know, N64 games. He wanted to play an N64 game, so I actually gave him my N64. I never really played it much. I mean, I had it when I was a kid, so yeah, but I never played a Super Nintendo game or ever played a Nintendo system game, you know. I never played an NES game or a Super Nintendo game. I never played any of those whatsoever, and I really wanted to get into it because I know there's a really, really large list of, you know, games for those consoles, and most of them are really good. So I really wanted to pick up, you know, a console that can play both, you know, games, or, you know, cartridge-based games. And, you know, I just went with the Retro Duo because, you know, it was cheaper, and, you know, it looks slim. It's not bulky. It's really slim. It's really lightweight, and I really like it. I heard there was like some bad news about it not being able to work after a certain amount of time, but so far my Retro Duo has been alive for, you know, about 2 months almost, and you know, it actually plays Super Famicom games, which is something they never mentioned. You know, you can play SNES games and NES games, but you can also play Super Famicom games. If you guys don't know what Super Famicom game is, it's actually a console that came out in Japan. It's basically the same thing as a Super NES, but you guys can play, you know, Japanese-based games. So yeah, I picked up a Retro Duo just to play my retro games. So let's start off with some NES games. I picked up the 1998 Batman. No, not 1998. That's what am I thinking? The 1989 Batman version of the movie version of the game, Batman video game. Now, this technically isn't really based off the movie because, you know, there's a lot of bosses that doesn't even appear in the movie. The only storyline that actually does follow the movie is, you know, the Joker and, yeah, Batman. That's basically it, you know? And it's basically a platformer game, and it's really hard. I'm not kidding you. It was really hard for me. I think I got up to maybe the 3rd boss, and then I got up to the 4th level, and I just like, oh my god, this is just way too hard. You really have to time your jumps. You can't just rush through the game thinking that you can, you know, plow through the game, you know, on your first playthrough. You really have to use some trial and error and really have to time your jumps. But still, it's a really fun game. The problem with this game I had was the first time I popped this in my Retro Duo, it did not work. It gave me a black screen, so I resetted it. Still gave me a black screen. Turned it off. still gave me a black screen. And you know, normally when a cartridge-based game doesn't work, if you guys are still new to this, what we used to do back in the old days, actually, when I had my N64, if a game glitched or didn't work, you blew at the bottom of the cartridge. And I did that, and it sort of did work. Sorta, because the title screen would pop up, but everything was so glitchy. Batman came out and looked so really glitchy, and I was like, okay, there's something really wrong here. So I got some rubbing alcohol, which is not the best way to clean a cartridge game, but it's a most effective way. So I took a Q-tip, dipped it in rubbing alcohol, rubbed the base of the cartridge, and cleaned it out, and there was a lot of dust and dirt stuck underneath, and then when I popped it in, it worked. So yeah, that was the only problem I had with that video game. Next up, this cartridge is a bit effed up. Actually, half the artwork over here is actually ripped off. If you guys can't tell what game this is actually Castlevania, the first Castlevania game for the NES. And I really like this game. I got up to Death's level, and then I stopped. These games are really hard or really difficult. They will make you pull out your hair. Like, yet again, you will have to time your jumps. You're going to have to actually time your attacks because when you actually press the attack button, when you whip, it's a bit delayed, so you have to really time it. The bosses aren't really that hard after you figure out, the rhythm of their attacks or their patterns, then you're fine, you're good to go. Usually when we were, I think when people were little kids, they would just rush into the boss battle, and then later on after dying a couple of times, they will realize, the boss's attack pattern and figure out a way to defeat them. The boss I had a lot of trouble with was Frankenstein. And what was the Frankenstein and Igor? I believe that's Igor. So Igor would jump around and shoot pellets or projectiles at you, and Frankenstein would just walk around. He doesn't really do much. And I really hate Igor because he kept jumping around, firing projectiles. And one time I beat Frankenstein. I beat the boss. But you know what happened? The most messed up thing happened was once I beat him, Igor thought, okay, I'm going to shoot another projectile at you before I die. And I was on my last piece of health too. So it attacked me, and I died. Even though I defeated the boss, and I was just like, really? Really? But still, really all in all, a good game. I really like Castlevania. You play as actually Simon Belmont, and you're just going through Transylvania and trying to kill Dracula. That's the main objective of this game. And yeah, really great game. I really love Castlevania. Next up, actually speaking of Castlevania, I have Super Castlevania 4. Now this Castlevania game I actually did beat. And this is a really fun game. You play as Simon Belmont again. Usually people say this is a remake, but technically it's not a remake. It sort of is, but the storyline is that, Dracula rises every single couple hundred years. So here he is again, rising after, a couple years, and he's here to terrorize Transylvania again, trying to take over Transylvania, and, it's up to Simon Belmont to defeat him again. And, basically, it's just the same thing as Castlevania. There's a platformer, you whip, but this time you can whip in 8 directions, because in Castlevania you only can whip in 1 direction. This time you can whip in 8 directions, up, diagonal, down. Really great way to play Castlevania, because, normally you have all these flying enemies, so it makes those flying enemies a bit easier to, beat. And, yeah, mostly everybody that always plays Castlevania has to mention their one hated enemy. The Medusa heads, that just zigzag up and down, up and down. I hate the Medusa heads. But after you figure out their pattern, they're not that easy. But still, I hate Medusa heads. Yeah, it's a really fun game. I beat this game. Took me a while though, but they have a password system, so you just type in the password and it'll leave you off at the last stage you were left off. And it was, it's a really great way to play a game, and it's really fun. Not that hard to use the password system. There's no, letters. You just type in codes. Yeah, really, really fun game. I really love Super Castlevania 4. A must-have game if you're ever going to play any Super NES games. Next up, I have some beat-em-up games here. We have the awesome red cartridge, or Super NES red cartridge, of Maximum Carnage, or Spider-Man, and Venom Maximum Carnage. Basically, Carnage, I forgot his real name, Sorry. I know he's a psychopath though, but basically he escapes from the asylum or escapes jail, and he's gonna terrorize New York City again. And he teams up with what is it? The clone Spider-Man? I forgot what the clone Spider-Man's name was. I totally forgot. But they form a team with him and Shriek, and then basically they're gonna terrorize New York City, or they're gonna kill Spider-Man. So you play as Spider-Man and Venom, and basically it's just a beat 'em up, side-scrolling beat 'em up. You just beat up your opponents, your enemies. The game is really hard. I'm just gonna tell you that you only get one continue in the game. You start off with one continue. So if you die once in the game, it's all over. You gotta start off all the way at the beginning. But still a really fun game. You can actually use some signature Spider-Man moves like web swinging, wall crawling, web shooting. You can use those types of attacks. But it sort of gets repetitive after a while. But still, like I said, repetitive games with me isn't that bad with me. I really like them. I think it's fun. Really fun game. I really like Maximum Carnage. Still haven't beat this game. It's actually made by LJN, which the angry video game nerd really doesn't like. And yeah, next up I have another Batman game, which is actually Batman Returns. This actually does follow the Batman storyline for that Batman movie, Batman Returns. You play as, of course, Batman, and it's just a side-scrolling beat-up, and all you do is just beat up clowns. And it's not a really hard game until it gets up to the boss battles. Like when you're fighting the Penguin and Catwoman, and oh my god, they are really, really hard. I'm not joking you. They are really, really hard characters to beat, or bosses to beat. And you will tear your hair out. You will be so frustrated at these characters. But still, it's a really fun game. You can actually use some moves from, Batman, throwing a Batarang to stun enemies and, punching them in the face, grabbing them and tossing them to the ground, or tossing them to other enemies, grabbing them and tossing them to a wall, or, grabbing two enemies and slamming their heads together. Really, really fun. The other bad part about it is when you're using a special move, it depletes your health. So basically, there's one special move where you just, use your cape to attack the enemy. So basically, you just swing your cape at them, and basically you lose health. And I'm like, how does that work? I don't understand. But yeah, and also there's another way you can actually play this game, which is basically a side-scrolling shooter. Basically, you just keep throwing your Batarangs at someone, and then they just die, so you just keep walking right, and then just keep throwing your Batarang. That's just the 2D versions, and the 3D version where you can walk around and fight enemies. But yeah, it's still a really fun game. I really like Batman Returns. I got up to the last part, fighting the Penguin, and then I gave up because he was just way too hard. Next up, we have actually the first SNES game I picked up and never played for my Retro Duo. If you guys can see the unboxing video of that, but I was really excited to get it, was actually The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Now, the reason why I picked this game up was actually because, I'm a big Batman fan. I'm a big Batman fan of the animated series, and I just finished watching the animated series, planning to do a video for you guys, but I'll get into more of that later on. But I played this game, and it's really, really fun. Yet again, another 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. And you have, different varieties of gadgets to use, like your grappling hook, your Batarang, Ninja Star Batarangs, smoke pellets, this kind of spray you can use to knock out your enemies. And yeah, it's really fun. There's about, I think, 8 stages in this game, 8 to 7 stages in this game, each one having their own boss battle. The first stage, of course, is the Joker battle, and some of them actually are based off some of the episodes from the animated series. Like the Joker level was actually based off, some parts were based off other parts. Like I think one part was actually based off the Christmas special, not the Christmas special episode, but it's basically a Christmas episode for Batman the Animated Series, and it was combined with also the this one where this spoiled kid, or this kid who's neglected by his father and whatnot, and the Joker like kidnaps him, and Batman has to go to save him in a theme park. So you have this roller coaster boss battle with the Joker, and yeah, and you have other, Batman villains, Poison Ivy, Two-Face, Penguin, Scarecrow, and the Riddler, which is actually one of my favorite stages. I really like the Riddler stage. The other bad part about this game is that the boss battle, yeah, is a bit hard until you figure out the boss's fighting pattern. I almost beat every single boss besides Poison Ivy because, for the love of God, I don't know why I can't beat Poison Ivy. She's just a really hard boss battle because she has that plant creature, which sort of looks like something I won't mention. And because I think a lot of people already made jokes about how this plant looks like a woman's lower area. But yeah, so this plant creature is really hard to beat, so I just skipped the stage and went to Penguin stage, beat him and all the other bosses besides Two-Face because the driving level stage is actually really hard in this game and I really couldn't beat it, so I had to skip that. I didn't want to skip it, but it was really hard. The controls is really wonky, but all in all, the controls in this game is really fun when you're doing the beat 'em ups, but the driving stage is just, forget that. But yeah. I'm going to stop it here and go on to a second part. So yeah, I'll see you in the next part of my games I recently picked up video. So see you guys later.